long-range missiles supplied by the UK. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens after that point, because I'm fairly certain Putin is going to see that as an act of war from NATO. So that's the US, UK, Germany, France, Poland, you name it, all the NATO countries. We're getting dragged into this because it's big money. You know, you think about the military industrial complex, how much money they're going to make from a huge war. It's basically been a proxy war with NATO from day one anyway. You know, like Ukraine's been begging for money and supplies. Where have they been getting it from? NATO countries. So even though we weren't actively there fighting, we were providing all the resources to continue that fight. I would encourage everyone, no matter what your stance is on the situation, to watch the interview between Putin and Tucker Carlson, and then do extensive research on the points which Putin raises, and do some historical research on NATO. But now, with that being said, we have come to the end of today's video. I hope that you enjoyed the clips, and if you did, please drop a like on the video and subscribe. It really goes a long way to help the channel out. And if you have not already done so, please join our Discord community server, the link for which you can find in the description. But for now, stay well, stay safe, stay curious. Until next time.